It took the jury only 16 hours to unanimously find all of the defendants in the Danziger trial guilty. Tonight, the prosecutors and the victims' families say that justice was served, while many of the defendants are already planning appeals. Nearly 6 years after the deadly shootings on the Danziger Bridge, a jury has found all of the accused, 5 current and former New Orleans police officers, guilty on all counts of civil rights violations and a subsequent cover-up. It did not find that the deaths of James Brissett and Ronald Madison amounted to murder.
That message is that public officials, and especially law enforcement officers, will be held accountable for their acts.
Prosecutors have been investigating what happened on the bridge in the aftermath of Katrina for the past 3 years. During that time, 5 former defendants pled guilty and became government witnesses in exchange for more lenient sentences. The FBI said it brought in more than 25 agents to investigate.
Part of our role is to uphold those rights, those civil rights of those citizens of ours that are most vulnerable.
6 people were shot on the bridge. 4 survived. James Brissett and Ronald Madison did not. All of the families worked closely with prosecutors, who today thanked them.
And they've worked with us, and they've patiently waited for today. And I'm in awe of them, and I want to express my gratitude to them.
The 5 defendants faced decades in prison. The jury did not buy their arguments, that they believed officers were down, and that they were fired on first before returning fire, and that in the context of Katrina, their actions were justified. Frank DeSalvo represents Kenneth Bowen.
Well, my client is prepared to take it to the next level. He's not surprised by the verdict, and of course we're not totally unhappy with the verdict.
The attorney for Anthony Villavaso said that had their request for a change of venue been granted, perhaps a different verdict would have been reached.
I think the fact that it was tried in the city of New Orleans was probably the biggest key. I think if we had tried the case somewhere else, if we had a jury that hadn't listened to all the pretrial publicity going into today, I think we would have had a completely different outcome.
Robert Faulcon, the only officer who took the stand in his own defense, plans to appeal.
Well, obviously, we're disappointed in that, in the verdict, but we're not finished yet.
U.S. Attorney Jim Letten hopes today is a big step forward toward reforming the NOPD. Sentiments shared by the attorney for defendant Robert Gisevius, who put it in the broader context of the next storm.
I still believe that the circumstances and the facts that presented themselves during Katrina caused a whole litany of problems for the officers on the streets and put them in a bad position. And if bad decisions were the result of that, well so be it, but it should never happen again.
It should never happen again. That is one conclusion to a 6-year ordeal and a 6-week trial with which everyone agrees. Well, the families of those who died on the Danziger Bridge say they finally have a sense of justice, but their healing process is far from over. Monica Hernandez spoke with the family members earlier and joins us now live from the Danziger Bridge with their reaction to the verdict. Good evening, Monica.
Good evening, Karen. Well, nearly 6 years ago today, the bridge you see behind me was the site of that horrific police-involved shooting that led to the death of a mentally disabled man and a teenager. Today, their family says the one thing that kept them going was their belief justice would be served.
You can still see the pain in the faces of those who lost loved ones to police bullets on the Danziger Bridge. But 6 years later, their families finally have a sense of closure.
It's over and it's not over. You know, but God has been good to us. He brought us these 6 years. I lived through this. There's nothing else left to do but keep a stiff upper lip and move on.
Sherelle Johnson's 17-year-old son, James Brissett, was killed on that bridge. Police also gunned down 40-year-old Ronald Madison. And after a long fight for justice, 5 former and current NOPD officers have been convicted for their involvement in the shooting and the cover-up.
They took the twinkle out my eye, the song out of my heart, and blew out my candle. But it's going to be all right, because justice has been served.
Lance Madison was on the bridge the day his mentally disabled brother Ronald Madison was fatally shot in the back. Meanwhile, Lance Madison was thrown behind bars for false charges that he shot at police.
I would like to give glory to God, because without him giving us the strength to make it through these 6 hard years of struggling, we would have never made it.
In the midst of an elaborate police cover-up, the victims' families were determined to find out what really happened on the Danziger Bridge. They somehow knew this day would come.
With the faith of God, I thought it would come. Yes, I did.
That's why I could sustain and stand here today, because I tell you, Mama, I should have been gone.
Now the victims' families have a message for those NOPD officers who, after many years, came forward in this case.
Without their testimony, we might never have known what really happened. We regret that they did not have the courage or strength to come forward from the beginning.
Now, the Danziger trial hasn't only impacted those directly involved. Many across New Orleans have been following the case closely. Tanya Dahl continues our team coverage now from the studio. Tanya, what are people saying about the verdict?
Monica, thank you. Whether you followed the trial from day one or just heard about the verdict today, 6 years after the fact, the Danziger shooting continues to weigh on people's minds. Take a listen.
I feel like to America, it is seeming like, New Orleans police could do whatever they want and they're killing innocent people. The man was not doing anything wrong and they just shot him and then tried to cover it up.
I feel police only have the right to use deadly force when necessary. The people on the Danziger Bridge were unarmed. They didn't pose a threat.
If they're guilty, you gotta say they're guilty and do something about it. Otherwise, the rest of the police force suffers.
Tonight from U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, who traveled to New Orleans to announce the indictments in the Danziger case a year ago. He issued a statement today saying that he hopes the verdicts helped heal the community and restored trust in the NOPD. He said, quote, "The officers convicted today abused their power and violated the public's trust during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, exacerbating one of the most devastating times for the people of New Orleans."